Your reflection stopped asking permission when you did. You arrive home with the city's pulse still fresh behind your eyes. The elevator doors hum open. You step into the quiet hall, coat heavy in your hand. The overhead light flickers for a moment, then settles into its steady glow. You hang the coat. You know it's been a while since you felt its weight as anything other than invisible. But tonight, you feel it. There used to be a time when walking through this corridor meant nothing more than the transition between outside chaos and inside comfort. But tonight, the corridor feels different. The light feels stricter. The silence feels louder. Your reflection in the window across the street catches you slumped shoulders, tired eyes, and you remember how you got here. You didn't think you were choosing to tolerate. It wasn't that dramatic. It was subtle. One nod. One okay, you said, even though your chest tightened. One sure, I'll stay when your body told you to leave. One smile you wore while your heartbeat raced behind your ribs, and something inside you registered. This wasn't what you signed up for. Tolerance took root like a background process. It ran quietly while you focused on being available, being helpful, being loved. You offered your time, you offered your silence, you offered your comfort, and you accepted what you used to reject because it seemed easier to keep the peace than to speak up, because speaking up felt noisy, risky, uncertain. So you slipped into default mode. The default setting. You show up. You don't ask too many questions. You wait. You accept. You do more than asked. You stay when they leave. And the coat hanging at your door grows heavier, not lighter. You don't notice day by day until you stop. And in that pause, you hear something inside you crack. The silence of the yeses you never voiced. Your reflection doesn't just stand there, it watches. It has seen every unspoken yes, every fine you whispered when you were not. It knows the moments you held your breath so someone else could breathe easy. It knows the times you said nothing so someone else wouldn't feel hurt. And it knows the cost. You sit down on the edge of the bed. The coat drapes over the chair beside you. The hum of the city seeps through the window. You feel the weight of every compromise that seemed invisible. The ones that underwrote your existence but didn't build your life. You whisper to your reflection, I didn't know I was on default. It nods. And in that nod, something shifts. Because recognizing you were on automatic is the first step to flipping the switch. You take a breath deep, loud, full. Your body remembers how it feels when you aren't holding back. The chest loosens. The shoulders drop. The reflection blinks. You don't need to declare war. You don't need to shout from rooftops. You simply need to stop, to pause, to let the coat fall behind you, to step out of the corridor into the night. The city bristles with noise. The lights blink. People move. But for a moment, you move differently. You walk with the calm of someone who has pressed the off-default switch. Not because you suddenly became bold, because you finally remembered you could. You remembered you were the one who chose your setting. You chose your route. You chose your value. The city pavement under your feet is no longer the path everyone else set for you. It becomes yours. In that stretch of sidewalk, you feel something new, the absence of the habit of tolerance. It's quiet. It's strange. It's lighter. The coat you left behind doesn't chase you. The reflection in the window across the street has smile lines now. Not because you're happy, because you're honest. You didn't let someone else's expectation define your peace anymore. You didn't allow someone else's comfort to be your burden. You didn't carry the weight of what you used to tolerate. You released it. And release isn't dramatic sometimes. It's a slow breath, a sideways step, a soft click of the lock you never knew you had. Let this moment echo. You are not required to accept what you used to tolerate. Tolerance was never neutral. It was a shape your life took because you didn't choose otherwise. But now you choose. You walk into that night with your reflection beside you, not behind you. The city flickers with possibility. The corridor is further back. The coat is hung. The default setting is off. Your breath is full. Your step is steady. And the reflection finally aligns with you because you pressed the switch, and tonight you start living on your terms. You carried their silence as proof that you mattered, then realized it was proof you didn't. You find yourself standing in a quiet room with the lights low, the clock ticking softly. The hum of the city outside might as well be a distant memory. You're alone now, but not in the way you wanted. You're alone because you filled the space with agreements you never voiced. You once thought tolerance meant kindness. You believed tolerance was patience. So you nodded when the weight pressed on your shoulders. You said okay when your gut asked why. You stayed when your body whispered leave. The unspoken yeses piled up in the corners of your mind, echoing with every pause in conversation, every stuck elevator door, every delayed message you didn't send. The echo of your silence became the soundtrack of your life. In the hallway of your mind, every unspoken yes is a footstep you retraced thousands of times. You stood still on the platform, watching the train leave, waiting for recognition that never came. You sat in the meeting room while your head pounded, wondering if your cost was worth someone else's peace. On the sidewalk, you forced a smile while someone else asked about your weekend, and the chest tightened because you didn't have one that felt real. You realized the cost of every fine, you whispered. That word fine held bills you never signed. It carried the price of your authenticity, your rest, your voice. You paid with moments you could never reclaim. You paid with breath you didn't fully take, yet you still nodded, you still stayed, you still accepted. The moment came softly like the clock ticking in that lonely room when you noticed the reflection. Your eyes looked back at you, not quite the same. The corners of expression had shifted. You realized you weren't just tolerating someone else's behavior. You were tolerating your own absence. You felt the pain you hadn't named. Not the big blow-up moments, the quiet drain of staying longer, speaking less, hoping they'd see you without you saying, "Look at me." The hurt you hid started to show up in your body. The tight chest, the shallow breath, the heavy coat you hung at the door. And then you made a different kind of choice. You turned the hurt you hid into the strength you show, not in a loud declaration, not in a billboard of triumph, but in the simple fact that you stopped tolerating. You met the echo. You listened to it. You said, "I don't pay that cost anymore." You stood without speaking. In that stillness, you spoke a volume. The city lights outside may have blurred past the window, but inside, you held your ground. You didn't rush to respond. You didn't rush to fill the silence. You simply stood, and the silence heard you. You see the fences now, the lines you didn't draw before because you thought they were walls they built around you. Now you understand they are fences you plant for yourself. You plant them with calm hands. You tend them. You guard them. They keep the peace you deserve, not the peace someone else demands. In the waiting room of your life, you stop being the guest. You sit down in the front row. You take the microphone of your decisions. You accept fewer compromises. You make more demands of yourself, not to please others, but to honor yourself. The echo of unspoken yeses fades. The cost you counted becomes the value you recognize. You realize you are not an extra in someone else's story. You are the director of yours. The camera pulls back and you see the set. You don't have to stay on the threshold anymore, so you walk forward. The lights roll up. The city hums with possibility. You don't rush. The footsteps echo differently, because now you're walking on your terms. You're refusing what you used to accept, and every silent yes you never voiced, they become portals to something truer. This moment is not about what you let slide. It's about what you decide. Not about tolerance anymore, about choice, about recognition, about becoming the person who doesn't just survive the echo but learns to fill the space with their own resonance. You breathe, you stand, the room is still, your reflection meets you, and you say, the cost is paid, the echo is heard, the silence has meaning. You are no longer accepting, you are choosing, and the new sound is your own voice. The strength you showed became the quiet place you hid. You remember the first time someone called you strong. It felt like a medal, a badge. You stood upright, nodded, smiled. Inside your chest, the muscles clenched, but you accepted that label because strong meant you kept going, you kept giving, you kept tolerating, you kept pretending things were fine when they weren't. In that hallway of countless, yes, I'll do it, and sure, I'll wait, you built a version of yourself that could carry what others wouldn't or wouldn't ask to carry. That version wore your shoulders like a nameplate. It winked at your reflection through the subway glass. The person who never complained, the one who accommodated, the one who tolerated because admitting you didn't would feel weaker. But what if that strength was making you invisible? One evening, the city lights blurred outside your window. You sat in your apartment, tickets of work still open on your laptop, phone buzzing dormant on the desk. You stretched your spine, you inhaled, and you realized carrying everything wasn't strength, it was weight. You weren't showing up, you were staying even when you felt all of you leaving. You climbed that metaphorical ladder of endurance. One step at a time, you lifted the boxes no one asked you to, the tasks you inherited, the expectations you embraced silently. You made it look easy so that no one would ask if you were okay. But inside, you were tired of easy. You were tired of invisible. That's when the turning point arrived, not loud, not cinematic, but sharp. The phone rang late at night. You answered. And you heard them catch their breath. Because you were still there, they assumed you'd always be there. The line went silent on their side while your chest finally spoke. Why am I still here? The answer wasn't theirs. It was yours. You recognized that the strength you had shown wasn't protecting you. It was hiding you. It had become the quiet place where your desires paused, your voice waited, your body obeyed. The label strong had made you believe you didn't need a break, you didn't need a boundary, you didn't need to walk away because you were strong. So you did something that felt foolish, you stepped away. Not with a grand exit, no fireworks, just a door closing gently behind you. The elevator you took tonight had the hum of emptiness, but you stood still. The lights above reflected on the metal walls, and you glanced at your reflection. The strong version looked tired, but honest, the chest untightened. You walked out. You paused at the subway platform. The train approached. People rushed on. You didn't board. You stayed because you were already on a new platform, one you built yourself. Turning your hurt into the strength you show isn't about hacking bigger muscles. It's about releasing the body you borrowed to carry someone else's weight. It's reclaiming the body you own, the voice you silenced, the breath you shortchanged. You no longer define yourself by how much you tolerate. You define yourself by how much you respect yourself. And respect doesn't roar. Respect whispers through your posture. It whispers through the quiet refusal to carry what's not yours. It whispers when you hang your coat, step out into your night, and walk away from the obligation you once accepted. In the city night, the streetlights catch the edge of your jacket. Your footsteps echo differently now. You don't walk to fill gaps. You walk to select space, to choose presence. The reflection in the glass across the street meets your eyes. It says, I see you now. I recognize the one who has always been here, the one you buried beneath strong. That doesn't mean the pain vanishes. The boxes you carried left bruises. The silent yeses left scars. But you don't hide them anymore. They trace your backbone. They remind you where you came from. They become the foundations for the strength you show. You speak up, not with loud declarations, not needing validation. You speak with your steps, your silent exit, your calm return, your body relaxed in a chair while the world waited for you to move. You move because you are not held by what you tolerated. You are guided by what you choose. The strength you show now is quiet. It is simple. It is rooted in the knowing that you no longer accept the default. You no longer assume you have to tolerate. You acknowledge you can walk away. You have that right, and you use it. So tonight, stand in your reflection. Let the city hum fade into background. Let your breath become your meter. Listen to the rhythm. It's not the one you borrowed to keep showing up. It's your own. And when it aligns, you will know. The strength you show is not the one that ignored you. It's the one that honors you. You won't apologize for walking away. You won't feel guilty for rejecting what used to seem acceptable, because you found the strength to stop being invisible, the strength to stop being the default, the strength to simply be. You answered when no one asked, and that became your silent resignation. You stand in a glass-paneled lobby at dusk, the city lights outside flickering like distant fireflies, and you realize you've been doing things you never signed up for. You answered the call that never came. You filled roles that weren't yours to carry. You replied when no one asked, and the reply cost something inside you. Once, you believed giving meant being valuable. Your availability was your worth. When someone needed help, you leaned in. When someone needed reassurance, you stayed late. When someone needed silence, you held it. And somewhere in the process, you stopped recognizing the boundary between choice and habit. The question shifted from "do I want to" "should I," and then to no question at all. You sat in the meeting room, lights humming overhead, minutes slipping past. You touched your phone as another message pinged. You opened, read, replied. Your shoulders shifted inward not because the request was too heavy, but because you assumed it was your job. Your chest tightened, but you typed yes, because you were someone who answers. Someone who doesn't wait to be asked. On the sidewalk later, you replay the steps. The city noise seemed to fade, and you heard your own footfalls. You realize how many times you answered before the question was even spoken. Your hands trembling slightly. You held the door for a person who didn't ask for help. You smiled at the server whose eyes glanced your way with expectation. You said, "I'll do it," without consulting the voice inside that whispered, "Is this mine?" The turning point is quiet. You pause mid-reply. The form is open on the screen. Your hands hover above the keyboard. You watch the blinking cursor. You hear the buzz of the elevator outside, and you take a breath. The coat you're still holding feels heavy. You set it down, the phone face down on the table. You lean back, and you think, why am I always ready? Not because they asked, but because I answered. Not because I offered, but because I assumed. That moment is the pivot. You realize that your readiness to respond has been a map of your tolerance. Every yes has drawn a path of expectation. Every reply has built a structure around someone else's comfort. The silent architecture of your availability kept you in the background while they lived their story. You were the filler, the echo, the always there. You decide then to show up differently. You don't shout, you don't announce, you simply pause. You stop being the extra in their scene. You don't answer the message immediately. You don't hold the door when it isn't for you. You don't smile simply because they expect it. You choose your presence. You choose your absence. You choose when to speak, and you choose when not to. In the city night, the lights blur past your window. You sit at the table by the glass. You watch your reflection. Your reflection sees that you're no longer filling requests with your life. You're reserving some of it for yourself, not as a punishment, as a gift. A sacred margin you once spent without question. You walk out into the hallway, footsteps echoing, the walls seem longer, the elevator dings, you step in, the mirrored doors show your presence. But instead of checking who's behind you, you just look ahead, the doors close. You breathe, not because you're waiting for someone else's cue, because you're giving yourself one. Turning your showing up into meaningful presence isn't about doing less, it's about doing what matters. It's not about giving up kindness, it's about choosing kindness that doesn't cost your voice. When you answered when no one asked, you gave away pieces of yourself. Now you answer only when your yes has weight, when your presence has location, when your voice has value. You repair yourself not with grandeur, but with intention. You walk slower. You mark the time between obligations. You let questions hang. You let the pause fill the room. You realize silence isn't emptiness, it's permission. Permission you grant to yourself. permission to refuse, permission to reserve, permission to occupy the space you once vacated. And the result? The world still spins, the phones still ring, the messages still come, but you don't move automatically, you shift. The echo of unasked answers fades, your chest loosens, your reflection nods at you in the glass. The hands that once typed yes without thinking now rest. The coat you hang by the window isn't heavy anymore. You left it there. You left behind the parts of you that showed up out of default. In quiet defiance, you exist on your own terms. You don't need to prove you're there. You just are. And they will notice your absence before your explanation, because presence without permission is a louder voice than any forced reply. This is not the end of the cost you paid. It's the beginning of your voice reclaimed. It's the moment your yes becomes your choice, and your silence becomes your strength. You don't answer because someone might ask. You answer because you choose to. You don't fill the role someone left open. You step into the role you created. You don't hand your presence to someone's script. You write your own, waiting for someone to notice you, waiting for someone to ask if you were okay, waiting for the moment you'd finally speak up. In that waiting, you accepted far more than you planned to and much more than you deserved. You recall how easy it felt to let the moment pass. The phone fades on your lap. The message stays unsent. You tilt your head, smile faintly, and someone asks, "Are you good?" And you say, "I'm fine." And your chest tightens because you know you're not. But the waiting room requires you to be polite, to bury your pulse so you seem steady. What is this silence? In that room, it isn't absence, it's negotiation, it's capitulation dressed as calm. Every "I'm okay" you whispered toward the wall echoed in your mind. Each echo imprinted itself on you. The light above flickered at 3 a.m., and you looked at the ceiling and thought, "I don't want to wait anymore." You weren't always silent. You had words. You had breaths full of unrest. You had dreams that shook you awake. But tolerance asks you to be quiet, to minimize your voice so someone else can keep theirs, so someone else remains comfortable, so you remain available. So you waited while your pulse ran your story. You waited while someone else claimed the headline. You waited while your coat hung unworn, your voice unasked, and still you came, and still you stayed. Until one day, the waiting felt endless. You stand up, the chair creaks. You feel your reflection in the glass door across the hall, framed by light and shadow. The reflection catches you, the waiting version, the version that accepted, the version that held, and you see the wear on it, the small cracks in the smile, the hesitation behind the yes. You don't ask for permission to leave the waiting room. You simply walk out, 1 foot forward, no applause, no sudden shift, just a step, a breath, a decision. The hallway lights greet you again, but this time you walk past them, you don't pause. The city outside the window presses against the glass, and you realize you don't have to wait for someone to invite you anymore. In your stillness, you declare something. You don't raise your voice. You don't need to. The pause between what you used to tolerate and what you will accept now holds more volume than any statement. You hold your body differently. The shoulders lift. The breath lengthens. The reflection nods. You remember the years you gave your availability, your time, your presence, your comfort. You remember the nights you stayed silent so someone else could speak. You remember the mornings you woke with your chest tight, your voice hushed. Those years aren't wasted. They taught you something. They taught you how the silence echoes. They taught you that waiting becomes a narrative where you aren't the protagonist. Now you design the next chapter. The waiting room remains, but you're no longer in it. You're walking past. You're choosing your presence. Not because someone invites you, but because you commit to yourself. You stand still in the middle of a moving crowd and feel your ground. You don't rush to answer. You don't rush to act. You wait for yourself. Quality in your presence does not mean responding to everything. It means responding to the right things. It means letting your silence protect your voice. It means that when you speak, you don't speak to compensate. You speak because your pause has prepared your words. When you stand still, you don't fade, you become visible. You join a meeting, you walk into a room, but the chair you take isn't the one offered, it's the one you claim. You are there not to fill a gap, you are there to contribute. You don't stay because someone expects it. You stay because you value your time. You don't accept because you feel obligated. You accept because the terms respect you. You inch toward the glass door outside. The city lights reflect off the pavement. Your coat is not yet hung, it's over your arm. You realize walking away from tolerance doesn't look dramatic. It looks quiet. It looks like step by step. Step out, step forward, step into. You don't need to shout about it. The stillness itself is loud. When you don't answer messages at midnight, when you don't reply to the late ask, when you don't show up just to show up, you're broadcasting a signal. You value yourself more than the habit of feeding someone else's comfort. And the result? You wear no medals. No one hands you a trophy. The city doesn't stop. Your life doesn't start shouting, but inside you a different rhythm starts to beat. One that doesn't echo your silent yeses, one that matches your breath, one that matches your step, one that matches your decision. This room you left behind, it's in view, but you're not in it. The probability of someone calling for you drops, but the probability of you calling for yourself rises. And that's enough. Because your voice isn't the loudest, it's the truest. Because your presence isn't the busiest, it's the chosen. You stand still, you breathe, you let your silence carry weight. You let your step carry value. You let your presence carry intention. You accepted less for too long. Now you accept authentically. You don't tolerate what you used to. You honor what you choose. Your edge isn't where they draw the line, it's where you draw yours. You walk through the lobby of your own decisions, the city lights behind glass walls shimmering, a soft hum in your ears. The world outside wants to tell you where your line ends. The expectation tries to script your boundary, but you recognize what is theirs and what belongs to you. You start drawing. In that hallway of supposed kindness, politeness, just this once, you let the borders blur. You thought every invitation was an opportunity. You thought every favor asked was a proof of your value. You thought the weight you took on was the price of belonging, so you built your life around other people's edges. You accepted their lines because you didn't know how to set your own. The coat on your hook grew heavier still, but tonight you decide you'll map the terrain differently. You step into the elevator, press the button for your floor, and you glance at your reflection in the metal doors. The reflection doesn't have a nameplate. It doesn't carry a title like helper or available. It just carries you, with your boundaries waiting to be drawn. You touch the glass wall of the elevator as it rises. You feel the vibrations of the city echoing through your fingertips. The ride is still, but something shifts inside. You remember how you avoided the question, where do I end and someone else begin? Because you believed you needed to erase the line to keep the peace. You believed avoidance was love, but peace without you is silence's cousin. You make your pause count. When the doors open, you step out into the night. The pavement lights cast patterns. You trace your route. You decide not to fill in gaps people expected you to. You decide not to answer every call, not to say yes by default, not to wait for someone else's version of acceptance. You create your own margin. Building the fence you always needed doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't require banners or loud announcements. It begins with a step backward when someone expects you forward. It begins with a no, you whisper. It begins with the phone on silent. It begins with the coat staying on the hook. It begins with you acknowledging that you are allowed to be more than someone's default. You lean against a building's glass facade. Behind you, the lobby light glows. Ahead of you, the street is alive. And you recognize this moment. It's not about setting a wall. It's about planting a fence. The fence doesn't keep people out. It keeps your value in. It keeps your peace from leaking. It keeps your presence for the chapters you choose. It keeps the you who used to tolerate safe. You place your hands in your coat pockets. Your reflection looks back. It has clarity now. It has depth. It has the line you are willing to protect. You walk, not fast, deliberately, because every step that follows the line matters. You don't dash past it. You cross it when you choose. You hover at it when you need. And you step away when you should. The city's rush surrounds you. Car lights streak. The neon signs pulse. But you hear your breath. You hear the space between the cars. You hear the moment the photo of your own life paused, framed by your decision. The world kept moving. You moved along your own blueprint. We all have boundaries we inherited. You don't matter. You take care of them. You'll figure it out. These are lines drawn by others, and you once accepted them because you didn't have one of your own. But tonight you loosen those tags. You erase the invisible ink. You write in bold, "Here begins my line." And once that line exists, something powerful happens. People start to map themselves around it. Some lean in, some fall back. Some redraw, but you remain steady because the fence you planted is yours. You didn't wait for permission. You didn't ask for space. You made it. In your new setting, you realize you're not protecting them from you. You're protecting yourself for them and for you. You're not refusing connection, just the cost of one-sided connection. You're not closing doors, just raising your standards. You're not severing love, just refusing its disguise. You step into a cafe, you order. The chair across from you stays empty for now. You aren't filling it. You sit, you breathe. You let the silence take one more measure in the room. It isn't discomfort, it's your boundary showing up. You clear the table, your coat is off. Your reflection in the window sees your spine straightened. The edge you drew glows faintly in that light. It's not sharp, it's sure. It doesn't need to cut, it just holds. It doesn't scream, it simply exists. You walk out into the night, the street lamps arcing above like guardians of your decision. You don't look for applause. You don't search for approval. You remember the years you erased your line. You remember the cost. You remember the coat. You remember the silent yeses. And you say to yourself, I will design what I'll no longer permit. You live your sentence not in vindication, but in authorship. You live the life where you're not merely reacting to others' expectations. You're responding to your own. The fence you always needed was never a prison. It was a garden wall, strong but open, protective but generous. It didn't stop growth, it gave the ground space to breathe. So let this be the moment you map your route anew. Draw the line, plant the fence, stand behind it, and know your peace is not the shadow of someone else's comfort. Your value is not borrowed. Your presence is not owed. Your voice is your boundary. Your breath is the signpost. You've stopped accepting what you used to tolerate. You're now defining what you'll no longer allow. And that line you drew, it becomes the foundation of your next chapter. Walk out of that waiting room and into the life you choose. You stand at the glass doors of the building, palms flat against the cool surface. The lobby lights dim behind you. The city sounds ahead of you. This threshold is not dramatic, it's still. It's simple, it's quiet, and in its quiet, it holds everything. Once you were in the waiting room, rows of chairs, overhead buzz, people passing through but not filling the space. You sat, you waited, you made yourself small. You accepted what you used to tolerate, but now the door is open and you are moving. Your breath deepens. The coat you carried is on your back. Your reflection in the glass is aligned. You don't stop to ask for permission. You don't pause to check if they're watching. You just step through. Stepping into your new story doesn't mean the old story disappears. The waiting room still echoes. The row of chairs still exists in your mind. The message you never sent, the phone you didn't answer, they are chapters, not the finale. You walk past them, not to erase them, but to turn the page. You walk into the city night. The pavement under your feet hums. The street lamps cast patterns. You sense the world differently, no longer as something you pass through, but as something you inhabit. Your presence fills space you once vacated. Your steps map routes you didn't follow. Your silence isn't absence, it's authority. You remember the years of tolerance, the jest nights you stayed late so they could leave early, the words you swallowed so the meeting would end, the phone calls you answered while your voice waited to be heard. They taught you something, that tolerance isn't harmless. It built walls inside you didn't realize. It made you smaller so someone else could feel bigger. It cost you your voice, bit by bit. Now you stop paying that cost. You stop being the extra in your own life. You pick up the pen. You walk through your own scene. You sit at a table by the window in a cafe. The world moves outside. People talk, cars pass, music softly plays. You don't fill the silence. You lean back, you stretch, you drink your coffee without looking at your phone. The coat rests on the chair beside you instead of hanging somewhere forgotten. The reflection in the window looks at you and you nod. You're entering your life as the director, not the extra. You remember you used to wait for cues, now you give them. You remember you used to stay where you were told, now you choose where to stand. You remember you used to speak when asked. Now you speak because you've prepared your voice, not because someone asked. This isn't loud. This isn't aggressive. This is steady, intentional, calm. The city crowd may not notice at first, but the subtle difference is measured. Your posture changes. Your exhale becomes slower. Your feet stop filling someone else's footsteps. They create their own pattern. The night deepens, traffic lights blink, you walk. At a street corner, you pause. You look up at the building where you once took the elevator down. You picture the hallway where you once hung on. You don't linger. You breathe. You keep walking. Your next chapter begins not with a statement, but with a stance. You're standing, you're choosing, you're committing. You realize that your boundaries, your voice, your presence, they were never negotiables. They were never optional. They were always you, and you're finally starting to treat them as such. The reflection in the window beside you catches the moment. It shows someone who still has the scars. But the scars are not hidden. They're not regrets. They're maps. On the lines of your face, on your shoulders, on your neck, there are marks of where you once bent. And you don't erase them. You honor them because they remind you of how far you've walked. Through waiting rooms, through silent yeses, through default settings, through the shadows of your own tolerance. So you keep moving. The city opens. The night stretches. The possibilities breathe. The coat you once hung weightless now. Your heartbeat echoes differently. Not the rhythm of someone enduring. The rhythm of someone choosing. Not the shadow of your own silence. The silhouette of your own presence. You stop at a crosswalk. The sign turns white. You walk. You cross. Your path is your own. The crowd disperses around you, but you don't follow. You lead. You walk past the storefront that used to reflect someone invisible. You pause for a second, glance at the mirror glass. You're visible now, a little worn, a little raw, but present, whole. You walk into the next block. You don't rush. You don't worry if anyone's watching. You are your own audience now. You don't seek applause. You don't wait for someone to pick you. You pick yourself. You step into your life with the quiet confidence of someone who stopped tolerating what they used to. The cost you paid becomes the value you protect. The silence you accepted becomes the voice you honor. The waiting you endured becomes the momentum you carry. The coat you once hung, you keep it on. But now it's not burden, it's your statement. And in that statement is your power. You look ahead. The street lights blaze. The city hums. The night invites. You don't hesitate. You walk because you are done being chosen. You are beginning to choose. You are entering your life on your terms, with your terms, not as an extra, not as background, but as the protagonist, the voice, the presence, the director. And when you step into your story, watch how the world recasts you.